What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. Among all the neat features in the wild area, one of the most requested challenges I've been getting is looking at the curry making process in Pokemon Sword and Shield. There are tons of recipes that can be made, but what does it take to make them all? Today we're going to find out how easily you can complete the Curry Dex in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Just like pretty much every other Pokemon game for the past decade, curry making is part of one of those main side pieces of content included in Generation 8. And to many, it's seen as just another version of Pokemon and Me from Pokemon X and Y. Although it's easy to put making curry dishes in the realm of being another one of those pieces of side content that most people ignore, there's actually a decent amount of incentive to give it a go, especially if you're looking to complete the Pokédex. Currently, using Pokemon Camp is the fastest way to evolve your Pokemon with friendship, as making curry dishes rapidly increases that stat, to the point where you can evolve Pokemon like Snom in only 5 to 10 minutes. This can actually also have competitive use, as it makes IV breeding Pokemon like Clefable much easier now that you can quickly evolve Cleffa after you hatch one to pass down greater IV chances. I'm not going to act like there's ever any reason that you should make every dish that's available in the Curry Dex, but being the completionist that I am, we're going to tackle this massive list and see what exactly you get from doing a challenge like this. Now, making curry is one of those easy to learn, hard to master kind of game modes, as there are tons of information that you need to know if you want to get this done as quickly as possible. But how exactly do you make curry? To put it simply, you only need two things: a main ingredient and berries. Now, the second one is pretty easy to figure out, but what exactly is a main ingredient? These items were introduced in this generation specifically for curry making, and you can obtain them in quite a few different ways. A good way to start your collection is to connect to the internet and just speak to every person that you see in the wild area. Every person will give you a random ingredient, and since people constantly spawn, you can amass quite a lot of items if you spend even like 15 minutes running around. The easiest way though to get most ingredients is to visit one of the vendors that are available in the wild area. If you talk to either one of them in Rolling Fields or at the stairs near Hammerlock Hills, you can purchase as many ingredients as you like, although there are a couple things that can make this difficult. The first issue is that the inventory for both vendors change daily, which means that it can take multiple days to purchase every ingredient that you're going to need. The seller in Hammerlock also has items that the other one doesn't, so if you haven't collected 3 badges yet, you're pretty much unable to complete the dex unless you want to spend time trading all the items from another game. Speaking of that, there are also 2 items that are version exclusives. Bob or Box food tins are only available in one game, which means you have to either find a friend to send them to you, or you have to get another Switch and the opposite game to fully complete this. On top of all this, the items in the shops have rarities to them. A few of the items, including the food tins, seem to only appear once on the list every day if you try to buy from them. These are marked to cost $2,200, so you'll most likely be trying to track those down as your last few. There is a small chance that the vendors will only sell the rare items on some days, but that only happened to me once on a random day, so I don't believe there's a specific day that guarantees that. In order to complete the dex, you're going to need to get 6 of each ingredient, but I'd suggest getting a couple more just in case you mess up the recipe so you don't have to go out hunting all over again. I want to note this is another one of those daily events you can manipulate with the Raid Den exploit that I mentioned in my last video, but if you're not a fan of doing that, it will probably take you about a week to gather all the items that you need. After you manage to get all those, there are still a couple more items that you have to get. The remaining ones are scattered all around the wild area, but thankfully they're plentiful and respawn daily, so they're by far the easiest ones to collect. The Large Leek, Fancy Apple, and Pungent Root are glowing spots in the ground, and if you hit every spot that's available, you should be able to get about 5 to 6 per day, so it should take no time at all. The final item that we have to get is one that most people will struggle with: Gigantomix. Gigantomix is considered to be a legendary item in the Sword and Shield lore, and as a result is extremely difficult to find. As of the date this video goes up, it seems like the only way to get one is through drops in 3, 4, or 5-star raid battles. There isn't a percentage chance, and to put it in perspective, I've done easily over 150 raid battles, and I've only earned 1. I can only imagine the rate is less than 1%, but thankfully you only need 1 to complete the dex. If you're looking to add this item to your dex total, the only real advice I can give is to either ask someone to trade you a Pokemon holding one, join another person's camp and let them use theirs, or just grind out a ton of raid battles until you get one. I've seen people mention in forums that they received one as an ingredient gift from talking to other players in the wild area, but there isn't any confirmation of that being legitimate at this point. At this time you should have around 26 different ingredients, which brings us to the next task: collecting berries. Obtaining berries is very similar to Generation 7, as there are special trees you can interact with to collect them. If you approach one of the trees and press A, berries will fall from the tree, and you can choose to either shake the tree more, or quit and collect what's already fallen down. Each time that you shake the tree, there's an increasing chance that a Pokemon will come out of the tree, and after you finish the battle, you'll lose a majority of what you collected from other Pokemon stealing them from you. I'd highly suggest saving beforehand, and if you keep trying over and over, you should be able to get around 10 to 12 berries from a tree each time. If you take the time to shake all 29 trees in the Galar region, you should have almost enough to take care of all the curry recipes. If you've been playing a lot of the max raid battles, odds are you have quite a lot of berries already, so with that included, you'll be more than prepared. Now that we've got everything to make our curry, let's just get right into it. So in order to make curry, we're going to need to set up our Pokemon camp. Although it'd be most convenient to do this in the wild area in case you need some more berries, you can set it up anywhere, even in buildings for some reason. From here you can see all your Pokemon that are in your party, and you can play with them and... oh yeah, that's not happening. That's much better. If we open up the cooking section of camp, we're able to start cooking, check our ingredients, and also view our Curry Dex. When we start cooking, the first step we have to do is choose our main ingredient. Since these only change the style of curry that you make, you can choose to not include one, which is actually mandatory for completing the Curry Dex. After that, we have to include the second half, the berries. So every berry in Generation 8 contains a specific flavor profile, which has been consistent in many of the games. But now many of the berries have multiple flavors, which makes the process a lot harder if you don't know how to make all the dishes correctly. Each main ingredient can have 6 different flavors: regular, spicy, dry, sweet, bitter, and sour. Some berries will only have one of these typings, but the rarer berries can have up to 5 different flavors, so you have to pay attention to make sure you don't make the wrong flavor. I've included a link in the description that contains all the berries' different flavors, which cuts down all the time that you spend guessing and hoping that you get what you want. The most important tip I could possibly give for this is that you don't need to fill up the entire cutting board with berries to make a dish. You can actually just use one and still get the same dish. They make it out like you have to put down 10 berries each time, but unless you ran out of one flavor of berries, you can make them really simple and they'll still have the same entry in your dex. There's a common misconception that you need to include 10 different flavored berries to get one of the regular versions of each dish, but if you only use one of the berries that has more than one flavor, but they're all the same taste, they'll even out and work out perfectly. The best examples of these are stuff like the Lepa berry, Oran, Citrus, Kelpsy, and Lum. So if you have a bunch of those, just use one of those for the main 25 ingredients and you'll save a ton of time. Once that's all figured out, now you have to actually make the curry. The whole process is based around button inputs and control stick motions. These can be done with motion controls, but at the volume that we're going to be making these dishes, I imagine it'd be a lot less tiring to just press the buttons. It starts out with you fanning the flame below the pot to bring the sauce to a boil, and it's important to make sure to not make the flame too high or you'll overcook the curry. You then have to stir the pot with the control stick until everything is mixed together. This is very similar to the pot making in Gen 4, as it's important to not let the mix spill outside of the pot. The final step is that we have to give it some love. You have to time your press so the ring lands within the innermost green ring to earn the most points. And after that, you're all done. The curry's made. This process takes all of a minute and a half to make, but we'll talk more about that in a second. After each dish is made, you're presented with them on a plate, alongside with a grade depending on a couple of factors. The most important is the rarity of the berries that you used. If you use super common berries like Oran and Cherry, you're going to get a much lower score than using ones that are much harder to collect. Although there's a list of berries by their rarity online, you'll know which ones are more important because in most cases you'll probably have very few of the ones that give out the best rating. The amount of berries that you use also make a difference in score. Although I know you get less points because I'm only using 1 or 2 berries per dish, the score only affects the experience and the happiness that it earns. I know some people might also mention that it affects portion size because there are 3 different sizes you can get, but that's only based around the size of the first Pokemon in your party. That actually doesn't relate to how much you put in at all. In total, there are 5 different ribbons you can receive, with the Charizard rank being the highest ranking for each dish. Although it'd be nice to get that on every single dish, spoiler alert, it's ridiculously difficult to do. If you're doing this solo, odds are the highest rank that you'll ever get is a Silpher Copperajah, and even then, you're going to need some really good berries to pull that off. The only way that I was able to get that rank was to visit one of the camps in the main routes and made curry with some of the NPCs. If you have at least a couple rare berries and follow along with their movements, you should get the Charizard rank pretty easily. The catch to this though is that you don't get to choose the main ingredient, and the other players can put in berries too, so it would take a ton of trial and error to complete every single entry with this method. But now that we know basically everything about how to make curry, how difficult is this process? So like I mentioned earlier, there are 25 different main ingredients and 1 Gigantomix required to complete the dex. There are a total of 6 flavors for each ingredient, which means that in total there are 151 different ingredients that you have to make. Although this seems extremely easy, as I said earlier that it only takes 2 minutes to make each curry dish, do the math. 151 dishes times 2 minutes equals 302 minutes, which is a little over 5 hours worth of pressing A and spinning your control stick around. I'd like to consider myself a seasoned veteran of mind-numbingly tedious challenges, but even I got pretty bored of doing this process. In other videos like the Professor Oak's challenge, at one point you're just pressing the A button over and over, and you can just watch TV or live streams and glance occasionally to make sure everything is all good. But this requires that you're attentive pretty much the entire time. In total, the cooking section took about 7 hours, and that was also because I ran out of berries halfway through, so I had to run around and shake trees for a while until I got enough to finish up all the sour flavors that I had left. It's definitely not a difficult challenge once you've got everything all set up, it's just the fact that you need to pay attention a majority of the time, or else you're going to get a really poor grading. But after you put in all that work, it must pay off really well, right? Once you complete all 151 dishes, you don't get anything immediately, as you have to talk to one of the wild area guides that are next to the entrances to Motostoke and Hammerlock. Since we haven't talked to him before, we get every reward at once, and there are quite a lot of things that you can receive. You're given rewards for having a certain amount of dishes in your decks, and they don't really follow a pattern, and they're more so just random increments that increase in difficulty as you progress. If you expected to get anything mind-blowing, I wouldn't get too excited. Every item that you earn is based around Pokemon Camp. You get things like ingredients that we won't use, new toys that we can throw around, and even the head of our rival if we make 80 dishes. Alright, but if you make 151 dishes, the reward has to be pretty awesome, right? Well, if we talk to the guide, they'll congratulate us for our hard work and give us golden utensils. You're joking. Now, I've received some pretty awful rewards in my time doing challenges. I mean, I caught 1500 Pokemon just to get a Pikachu that knew Surf. But this is on a whole nother level. If you spend the time making every single batch of the curry in the game, odds are that you're probably not going to ever do this again. If you're smart, you'd have all the Pokemon you want to evolve with friendship lined up, so in most cases you're probably only going to use this if you want to evolve a Pokemon that you bred for competitive. I will say though that the fan is really cool because it changes from a Magikarp to a shiny Gyarados, but overall this was a pretty underwhelming reward for the amount of effort that you had to put in. In total, this took me about 10 to 11 hours to collect everything and cook it all, so I think I'm done with Pokemon Camp for the entire lifespan of this game. I know I've been saying this a lot recently, but I wouldn't really recommend doing this. However, I will say that if you are planning to evolve a bunch of Pokemon through friendship, hopefully this video helps you out in a little bit by making the process a little bit easier. If you're interested in taking on the challenge for yourself, I have a bunch of links in the description to help you out. And if you end up completing it, tweet me your results at Johnstone YT. Other than that, that's all there is to say about completing the Curry Dex in Pokemon Sword and Shield. And that's going to do for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and consider subscribing, as I'll be making more content like this very soon. If you have any other suggestions for videos that you'd like to see, leave a comment below. Follow me on Twitter to keep updated with new videos as they come out. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.